Great. Well, welcome everybody to another great webinar lined up with Beta. As a short introduction to myself, I'm the host for today, George Dobbins, founder of Beaumont Bailey and co-founder for the Beta. For those of you unfamiliar with Beta, Beta is an international networking group called the Built Environment Technology Association, whose aim is to really bring together all parts of the ecosystem, from technology providers, consultants, contractors, asset owners, and everyone in between. Today we're joined by some fabulous panel speakers who will be talking on the topic of implementing technologies and the realities of doing so. So what I'll do is just hand over to each of them to introduce themselves. Tony, would you like to kick off?
Yeah, thanks, George. Hello, everybody. So my name's Tony Harbour. I head up the Technology Partner Programme for Procore across the EMEA region. So nice to meet you all.
Brilliant, thank you. Adam, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, Adam Street. I lead digital for Jacobs in Europe, and that's really shifting us for changing how we deliver value to our customers and shifting from a pure people-based business to a people technology with a different business model. So that's my role.
Brilliant, thank you. Omri, would you like to fire away?
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Omri Solek. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Truster. We've created a construction operations platform where we basically enhance construction site efficiency and safety standards. Happy to take part in today's discussion.
Great to have you as well, Omri. Marco, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, Marco Bonelli. I'm the digital lead for Vinci Construction UK, leading digital engineering and digital transformation across the business, and how do we try to change construction from a general contractor point of view. Welcome, everyone.
Super, welcome, Marco. And last but not least, Felix.
Hi, everyone. My name is Felix Neufeld. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Disperse. Disperse is a construction technology startup working with large contractors and developers, predominantly in the UK and the US.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for joining us. So if we just open up with the first question and perhaps get some of your perspectives on where technology is at the moment within the industry, what perspectives you're seeing. Adam, do you want to kick off?
I didn't realize it was a virtual short straw. Yeah, maybe I'll give us a reflection from a McKinsey report in 2016. And construction was the second least digital of all industries, just ahead of agriculture and hunting. And when the survey was redone in 2020, I'm delighted to say that agriculture and hunting is now more digital than our industry. So I don't think we have a technology or a data in terms of a tech problem, more of a culture and a business model challenge that our industry faces if we're actually going to shift our industry and move it from the bottom to near the top. You could look at that as a negative. The other way is looking at it as a positive. So what if we are able to embrace technology differently, what would the impact be for our customers and the wider environment? What impact could we have if we moved up that ranking? But I'd encourage someone to Google McKinsey 2016 report. It is quite insightful.
It is a very good one, and it's a very interesting way of kicking off around culture, which is something we're going to be coming on to. Tony, do you want to share your perspective on kind of where you see the industry's view on technology?
Yeah, I agree with Adam. I read the McKinsey report in 2016, read the 2020 report, so there's no surprise there. I mean, look, the biggest thing that you generally see in construction is, and it's an age-old adage of we've always done it that way. Right, so guys on a construction site are used to building in a certain way. They're used to following a certain process, a certain guideline, and all of a sudden they're being thrust into this digital era where it's like, hey, we've got an app that does this for you, or we've got this solution that does this for you, and they're really standoffish in terms of, it kind of scares them a little bit where these guys are looking at technology to help them do their work. But certainly from our point of view, we've seen the biggest advocate for technology that we've seen are I suppose the aging worker on a construction site that's really negative on technology and how it can assist them. And once you start to get these guys on board to using that tech, they're the biggest advocate of moving tech forward. And we see that, quite a lot. But what we also find is that people are really standoffish in bringing it on board But once they do, they then start to find shortfallings and pain points within their organization that they can then fill the gap, by using technology. So it's an interesting one at the moment, that's for sure.
Absolutely. It brings a really interesting point around usability as well that I think is going to be a key part of this discussion. Marco, what would your perspectives be?
Building on what Adam said, that we are among the least or not the least digitized industry. If you look at these reports, so the top one are ICT or media, so their delivery is a media product. So of course they are the full digitized. But if you look something similar to us, like manufacturing or oil and gas, they are still very much more digitized and innovative than us. But probably what we can look is they produce a repetitive product, while us in construction, every single project is a bespoke solution, totally different than before. What we have in common, though, is the process on how do we plan, manage, design, construct the building. So if we can fully harness and standardize the process using digital and innovation, we can really try to bring our industry much higher and be more digital and more innovative. And as also Tony said, is the culture. So try to build more, not focusing on tool, but focusing on what we try to do on convincing people that using digital tools is better, not just because we have done the same thing in the last 20 years.
Perfect.
Fall in love with the problem, not the solution.
Yeah.
That's the main issue. Don't try to change the industry from within. George, sorry for if I'm jumping, but we see the change of the industry, and completely agreeing with Marco. Looking at construction sites, it's a production line that produces itself. It's one of the most complex working environments in the industrious world. We need to provide tools that answer specific problems, not a general solution just for the sake of solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an interesting point that you make, Omri, about, do organizations look at focusing on particular problems, or yes, look to cater for everything? I think perhaps, as we can talk about it throughout the sessions, part of it has been previously focused on, can we do absolutely everything for everybody? And actually some of the organizations getting a lot of success are those that are more focused. Felix, do you want to share your views, and especially from a startup, building on perhaps what the others have said, and how you see it being able to implement in some businesses?
Yeah, that sounds good. So I actually strongly disagree with the culture point. So I think it's a very common thing that is being said, that in construction the culture is just not there. We have the complete opposite experience. I think we see across projects, across customers, like a real willingness of people to engage with solutions. And of course, there's always some people that are like standing in the way, but I don't think in any shape or form that's like more the case in construction than in other industries. You always have a certain level of these types of people and that type of people. But you have actually, I would say in construction, you have on average more individuals that you're not joining the construction industry, right, if you want to become super rich, or you're like incredibly arrogant or so on. Like, people tend to be actually really oriented towards like building something that they can see for themselves, a building going up and being part of a team doing that. So I would say actually construction people on average are more willing to engage in new things and help building stuff that makes sense. But I would say that the technology as it is today just is fundamentally unfit for the industry, and it kind of goes back to the points that Marco and Omri raised, which is it is a incredibly complex environment, and that means that the way that the technologies, I would say that there's a need for technologies that actually work in a context. And maybe to Adam's point on business models, I also think that yes, the business models in construction are kind of screwed up. But my opinion is that we will not solve this problem if we just look at it through that angle. But I also think on the tech side, the business models are messed up, and that all tech businesses are trying to be just software companies, and that fundamentally doesn't work either. And there has to be business model shifts on both sides, and new solutions that actually move the needle on construction sites. If that's not the case, we will never get anywhere.
I can see Adam nodding his head on that one.
Yeah, I was reflecting what you said, Felix, in terms of sometimes culture depends how you describe it. End user focus, which picks up on the point that Tony made, and that age is a myth, right? If the tech really adds value and it's easy to use, there's no instruction manual for Netflix, for example. So if you make it easy, when my dad uses an iPad, my mum, in their 80s, they even use Apple TV now on my account. Hope this is not being recorded. But it's easy to use, so it changed the way they interact with it. It's like online banking. So if the technology is end user centric and makes people's jobs easier, this thing of they're not young and is irrelevant, right? It means adoptability is so simple. You talked a bit about business model, and I would go back to organizational complexity of how the industry operates, and it is a complex, fragmented industry. But the point that I think to add to is often organizations look for a silver bullet. I'll just do one thing and boom, we've got business transformation enabled through digital. And for those of us that remember David Brailsford, anyone here remember David Brailsford? He was sort of slightly disgraced now, I think, but he was the man around these marginal gains for the British Olympic cycling team, that he had to get every small thing right. And if you put all those things together, then you got the change which enabled all those gold medals for the cycling team. And I think sometimes as an industry, we look for silver bullets. You do one thing, boom, everything happens. Actually, a lot of these are marginal gains. It is the tech, it is the usability, it is the business model, it is the supply chain fragmentation. And so we shouldn't kid ourselves that this actually is really hard. And all the things have to change, not necessarily at the same time, if we want to change the industry. So I think all the points that a lot of the panelists have raised are all absolutely valid, but you've just got to do all of it, not just individual elements that we pick out.
Very, very fair point, Adam. But where would you say organizations can perhaps get the best wins at the moment there? I mean, there's lots of places that we can make marginal gains. Are there some that perhaps are looking more achievable now than others?
Well, I think I'll go back to culture, right? Because I think Tony or Felix said he didn't really believe in that. But to my mind, if you think about, someone said to me once, who's a customer? Anyone that's not you. So if you treat your users as customers and make everything you do user-centric and start with the end user in mind, then actually culturally, you make it easier for people to adopt technology. So the way I start is culture creates an environment for doing things differently and creates the ability for people to test and try things. So there's one place I'd always start is there and drill into people, end user centric. How do you create value? How do you make it easy to use? And then as you get people to start to adopt and use technology, they can then take it away and run with it. So that's a starting point that I'd always go with. But again, that's a perspective from me in a more of a consultancy type organization, which might be different from a contracting type organization. So I'm conscious of that.
Can I touch on that as well, George? Because one of the things that we see that's really interesting is a lot of the technology in the space that's coming through now. The people that are developing these solutions are from the industry. So they've had an issue on a construction site. They've been there, they've seen it. They've been so frustrated with that solution that they're like, hang on, there's something better here. There's got to be something out there that we can do that's going to make our lives easier and everybody else's lives easier. So technology is generally born from that frustration on a construction site. So I totally agree with you, Adam, in terms of, that cultural fit, ease of use. Half the time people develop these solutions because they want to make it easier for people. And that's all born out of, frustrations from a site or frustration from using, particular legacy software that might be out there at the time. So, I can't agree with that anymore.
That's really interesting. So if we've got a position where actually you've got frustrated people from sites or out of consulting businesses that are identifying the problems, creating solutions that perhaps are, quite user-centric, what are the hurdles then that are really stopping it? Marco, is there anything from your perspective as a contractor that you're seeing that either increases the pace of adoption or slows it down?
Yes, so when we try to bring technology on site, we notice that, I know that we come back to the same topic about culture, but work in a way that you don't just get the tool, we just bring it on site, hoping that they get adopted. We start from the user first. So we define the problem, we review the process, how this tool should be used, so we make simple. We do the right communication campaign, showing why we have to use it, why it's making our life better. So creating a kind of fertile ground for the tool to be used much easier. So instead of just going straight away, we purchase this tool or we identify this technology, let's bring it on site, is make a step backwards, change the process, understand if it's adequate, make a communication campaign, let's bring the tool on site. And we notice a much faster implementation adoption because we have created this fertile ground.
And other particular areas that you're seeing are more interesting, that are perhaps problems that are solvable at the moment, where the technology is there and where the users are, coming to you asking for solutions to particular problems?
Yes, definitely. So we have different areas, from planning, from construction, from estimating, where when we start to bring new tools in other areas, they realize that the entire team, the entire business realize that having a new tool is going to the right direction to make life easier. So we start to have so many teams members asking, why don't we use this technology? Why don't we change this one? So we started to create innovation campaigns. So through a platform where we ask every one of our employees, can you just give us an idea what is going wrong, where can we help, which technology then can we use? So we believe that democratize innovation and in construction is the right way to bring the industry towards a much better position on the McKinsey report.
And that's really interesting. So you're almost creating that culture where you've got these innovation centers and you're really getting to think about what innovation it could be, and perhaps thinking, beyond what they were doing yesterday. And coming back to Felix's point that lots of people in the construction sector seem to actually want to solve problems and want to do things better, and that focus. Marco, from your side in a contractor, have you seen particular pockets of the business kind of more excited or more engaged than other parts?
Definitely, yes. So we see now on the site part, so when we are on site, our site team has become very more engaged about new technology. And as Felix said, yes, age is kind of a myth. Now we see much older people that they really want to use new technology, because one of our key elements is usability. So improving or adding technology can be hard in the background, but need to be a very easy tool to use. So we have discarded a certain type of technology because they were hard to use from the user point of view. So for us, if we get the key usability, we just bring to our site, everyone is willing to learn because they see the benefit, especially from a site point of view, our site team.
Yeah. How, Omri or Felix, how do you see that from your side?
Felix, you want to start?
Go ahead.
Oh, thanks. I think looking at the industry from a bird's eye view, at the end of the day, there's so many stakeholders that are involved in the working environment. From the basics of the simplest subcontractor material providers, the general contracting companies, the developers, and anyone around it. So when you take the second circle and you add in insurance company and material providers that are external and tool manufacturing, our industry is dependent on so many moving parts that everyone is looking for the first competitive edge that could be brought quite easily from the integration of technology. And second, for the ability to improve the profit margins and raise the safety standards, I think, or at least as what we see it in the working environment. Technology is an enabler. It's part of a solution. Adoption is critical. And as mentioned before, simplicity is key. Both ease of implementation, ease of use. And I think that one of the things that we've done that was basically a critical path for us is creating a solution that doesn't only provide data, it provides insights. So take the information, chew it, provide something that is actionable and insightful and gives a different perspective. So I think looking at the entire ecosystem and the entire working environment and the industry itself, we're about to see incredible companies that are not expected to all of a sudden be involved, both in terms of integration of technology and in terms of investment as well. You see CVCs from corporate venture capitals from companies that were unexpected, from GCs to even tool providers.
And what about your perspective, Felix?
Yeah, so I think from our perspective, one of the key things that we've realized over the last couple of years is how, there's to the point also earlier raised, that there's lots of people, there's lots of moving parts to the side. But at the end, what it comes down to, right, is that there's like a core workflow within a construction project, which is like really defining, on a given week, what is going to happen, who is going to do what machines, what materials, what drawings need to be done. And that core workflow has no technology involved in 99% of cases outside of spreadsheets in some scenarios. And that's just the reality of it, right? And that's actually something that we've learned the hard way over time, right? As in, we were initially thinking, well, we can use the models. Like, well, no, we can't use the models because that they're not being used. Well, we can connect to the program. No, we can't connect to we can connect to the program, but there's no point in it because the program has nothing to do with what is actually happening on the site, right? So like we gradually got to the realization that there's all of this other stuff, right? But like ultimately, unless the core workflow on the side of how things are actually executed week on week have a more clear understanding of, hey, this is how we're executing it, this is the plan, this is the reality, everything else just doesn't make much sense, right? And our customers have been asking us for all kinds of analytics, right? It's like, can you tell me what my scenarios are for the next couple of months? It's like, I can't tell you because like there's no source of proof neither on what's happening or what is supposed to happen, right? They looking to integrate with drawings again, like that doesn't make sense because the actual last version of the drawings has nothing to do with what is actually happening. And from our perspective, from Disperse's perspective, we are looking at this as like a fundamental failure of the tech sector, right? As in like the tech sector hasn't been able to produce something that can actually within this core workflow be so useful, so intuitive, so easy to use that the teams use it and prefer that to kind of guessing and recollecting from memory what has been happening and kind of trying together figure out what's going on, right? And that's ultimately like the first big step that we are focused on as an organization. And it's not what we've started with, right? We've started very much with like the more like scheduling integration, analytics and other things like that. But we started to realize that that's just all bullshit as long as we don't solve those core elements. And that's kind of why we gravitated towards that. But maybe as a last point on that, what I think is a really big problem in construction is that because this is a really hard problem and you're trying to kind of interface with the core project management team, construction management team, and making them change their ways, what happens more often than not in construction is that tech companies gravitate the other direction, right? They're like, oh, this is really hard. So instead of trying to solve this problem, well, let's kind of do something on the periphery, right? Like let's deal rather with like payments or like, let's do something on the sites, but like ultimately those sites things will never really be unlocked unless we get the core right. And it's hard. It is hard. It is a fundamentally more complicated environment and workflow than anything else. And that's why, again, I think there needs to be also a rethink on how technology companies approach that and what type of business models as technology companies you take on to approach that problem.
I must share an example, Felix, if I may, from something that we just encountered a couple of days ago, and I was so mind blown that this is the situation, and I think it relates highly to what Felix mentioned. So, one of the companies that we're working with in the US uses a project scheduling Gantt program. Doesn't matter the name, but they invested so much time into inputting all the information, and instead of sharing using a share button. And spreading and basically sending it to everyone that is involved, they take a snapshot of the screen. So, and that's exactly that. So if it becomes a part of the workflow and the day-to-day initiative, and when you dictate it to the subcontractors and saying, hi guys, we share our project Gantt through XYZ, doesn't matter, and everyone aligns and everyone knows. And I completely agree with Felix about what we said, that the easiest solution is to go where everything is already clear and you don't need to solve any critical issues. But I think the real challenge and the great success will come from companies that are identifying the pain points that are suffering and targeting them.
I can see Adam nodding quite aggressively at one point as both of you were talking.
Yeah, I was. It's always interesting as you reflect on it and trigger a couple of things triggered in my mind. I put a few things in the chat with some videos to watch that are quite enlightening. One is there's a great Deloitte article, and sometimes you realize that it's probably taken some time to get something to be so simple. And they said there were three challenges, and I was actually trying to Google it and find the quote to share. But the challenge of the industry that the Deloitte had come up with was every project is perceived as unique, and every project manager wants to run their project differently. And so you start to think about it, and I think I talked to you, George, and I before the session earlier in the week about how do you watch the film The Founder. The film The Founder is about McDonald's and a guy called Ray Kroc who basically steals the concept from McDonald's brothers. But what's fascinating, if you watch the film, you'll see the first 5 restaurants that he creates where you got the golden arches, but the menu's different, the quality's different, it's all over the place. And then he stripped the model, and now you look at McDonald's around the world and you get a different experience. You get wine in certain places, you get a kiwi burger, you get halal burger. But if you boil it down, it's probably got 40 or 50 key ingredients and a very consistent methodology by which that product is delivered to you. So consistency as well is key. So you can't drive a technological change if everything is different everywhere around the world, or even in an existing organization. And you build a building once, you build it again, you do it completely differently because the project manager says, well, this project is unique. So I like that Deloitte quote and then the film The Founder, because it brings to light that actually to drive scale, you've got to drive consistency. And you can't put technology into inconsistent ways of working, inconsistent supply chain, inconsistent business process. And that is dull, tedious, and not sexy. Everyone's jumped to, machine learning, analytics, all this data, great. But if the data is not consistent in a consistent way, Bitcoin, blockchain, I'm getting excited now, right? It'll change the world. Well, actually, the first thing to do is get a consistent data model, consistent business process. Then you can start to do the sexy stuff. So, yeah, I was nodding vigorously because some of the thing we talked a bit about is maybe dull, not sexy, not that sophisticated, but we seem to start at the wrong end. We've got to get into a mind culturally that not every project is unique, and we can drive much more consistency in an organization or an industry if we really want to become a digital industry.
I agree with that. It brings me back to one of my old rugby coaches when I was playing when I was younger, that you get the basics right, everything else kind of falls into play. And that's the same across the board, regardless of what industry you operate in, business process, anything. You perform the basics right, everything else will fall into place. And it's no different in construction. So yeah, I agree with that. And touching your point, I mean, one of the things that we've noticed within Procore is exactly as you've just said, the adaptability of different projects and people using things differently. Some of the companies that sign up and utilize Procore, yes, they might have a standard, way of operating, but as you said, every single project will operate differently.
Yeah.
So being able to kind of be flexible on that, the workflow or the core business that they actually do is incredibly important.
Absolutely. And Marco, have you got any perspectives to share from your angle as a contractor?
Not much. I totally agree with Adam. What I said when we start to talk is process is the key element in construction. So our project is a bespoke solution. So if we try to standardize a process, now we start from day one to plan, tender, resourcing, manage the project. We definitely can apply technology in a much easier way. And in this moment, every single project within the same organization is treated as a bespoke solution. That will never help us to go forward. It's one of the reasons why we are always at the end of the innovative or digitalized industry in this moment. So we are trying this, what we try to do us in this moment as a Vinci, try to look at our process first, try to standardize, get the right data in a structural way. So then we can start to apply technology, look about the data, but there is no point to look about machine learning, artificial intelligence, if every project is different. So we don't get any result or any really useful data.
And so if it's really about building the foundations and the core infrastructure to then enable further technology down the line, where does the emphasis lie within the construction sector and within the wider engineering sector? Who can kind of really grab hold of this and lead, and who needs to be doing so?
I believe as a construction, being a very traditional industry, work as a pyramid. It's hard to get a full innovation team that work as separate team than everyone else. It's not project-based, so it becomes a cost. I believe that in construction, we have to try to involve everyone. So all of us has to work in this innovative mentality, try to change what we do, because working in a business where at 2-3% profit, we cannot afford to create a full innovation or digital team on the side of what we currently do. It become it's such a huge cost that it's not going to be worth it for the industry. So try to engage with everyone and try to work together. I believe that's the only way that we could move as an industry.
Do you not think as well, though, we were talking about data earlier, and some people kind of throw the data out, you know, as a case in point. It's like data's not that important. I mean, I remember going to a digital construction show, must be 10 years ago, and when it was just kind of in its infancy, and it was all about data's going to be the new oil, you know, data's going to be the most important thing. And it's not really kind of taken off. But the point I'm trying to make is that I think construction isn't the only industry that does this, but it generally tries to solve a problem when it's too late. So that problem's already arisen, something's happened. It's like, actually, we need to solve this, but no one really learns from that. So I think where the data does come in handy is analysing, you know, exactly how did that project go, where did we win, where did we lose, you know, what were the benefits, what were the drawbacks, and trying to solve those problems, you know, as early as possible. You know, you start early on in a process to kind of solve previous issues. You know, it's a huge thing.
Yeah, and adding to that, if I may, George, as Mark mentioned, innovation teams are becoming a part of companies, and adding to what Tony just mentioned, not all the companies have innovation departments. So taking data, which is a new resource of the construction industry next to lumber, steel, and concrete, but you need someone to take that information and take those Excel sheets and take those numbers into insights. So I think it's one of our biggest responsibilities as tech firms, taking information, taking data, and actually providing the 100% product, and leaving it at numbers won't really help our clients. They need the extra mile of saying, hey guys, this is what we found out. We've seen in other projects that this is the way to deal or address this issue, and this is what's going on in our construction site. So I think that it's critical to take it to the next level.
Yeah, Adam, I know you had views, especially on the role of data within construction companies and more broadly across the sector that we spoke about. Do you want to sort of share some of those?
Yeah, I think so. I left GE as a sort of project business in sort of energy and rail, and then came into Atkins, and I sort of looked at products quite early on. And I think as I got into Jacobs, more and more around data, the data life cycle, and how important it is. And again, I'm going to reference a film, right? Minority Report, for that. I can't see anyone's faces. So those who have watched the film, and pre-crime. Well, our industry is a crime. Everything's over budget, over time, and never quite get the quality you want. Even for those of you who've done a home renovation, right? If you've done it on time, on budget, and quality, you're a genius. Just think it's impossible. The complexity and scale of what we do today, the human brain is no longer able to compute. So we've got to blend, if you like, the brain and the domain and data together. And machine learning analytics only works with large volumes of data, and it has to be consistent. So we can start to use data to predict the future. It's not a question of when a program goes wrong. It is likely to go wrong. But if I can predict it in the future and have an intervention before it happens, I'm more likely to have a schedule and cost benefit. It also helps people make better informed decisions. Let's take an example like Crossrail, for example. Now, I wasn't involved, but we made a decision was made that rolling stock and signaling were procured by two different competing organizations, which made sense from a CapEx perspective. But if all the technology of the signaling system sits on the train, and that's now your competitor, you've introduced a massive integration risk on a program. So you might have saved yourself 25 million CapEx, but you've now introduced $1 billion fare box revenue issue because you delay the program by 2 years. So it's ability as well for senior people on boards who are running or funding major programs to use data and insights to predict what might happen and why, to allow them to make better informed decisions. So for me, products, if you like, is the gateway to data. And by understanding domain and hindsight and, if you like, expertise and experience, we can actually allow a different level of the organization to make better forward-looking decisions, where we can better predict what the outcome might be if we take a certain course of action. So things that are non-intuitive, decisions that would be seen as not right, actually, in the light of day, people make a different decision that is actually non-intuitive that will lead to a better outcome. So I think data is fundamental, but going back to the point I think Tony had raised as well, but if you don't get consistency, you don't get the consolidation, you don't get standardization, you can never predict the future because all the data you're trying to use is all over the place.
Yeah. So just summarizing kind of where we've got to at the moment, it sounds like there's good opportunities, particularly on sites where productivity can really be unlocked. Perhaps technology providers move away a little bit from that because it is so challenging to get some of the momentum there. Equally, culturally, perhaps there are pockets of kind of really great collaborative behaviors, and there's more we can do around that. And then as a sort of third point, data and getting the infrastructure right in order to develop the right stepping stones for technology is really, really crucial. In terms of data then and getting that infrastructure right, for organizations really challenging innovation in this sector, who should be responsible for that data model? Who should be taking ownership? Is it a shared ownership? Is there part of the supply chain who can really own that more so than others? Open to the floor if anyone has a view on that.
I'd love to start if possible. So I think it goes both ways. It's the tech firm's responsibility on delivering the highest quality level of data. It's our responsibility to analyze it. But I think that the communication between tech vendor to construction company, whether it's a GC subcontractor or any other part of the stakeholders impact chain, is to be very communicative about the needs and wants of specific data. If there is a specific pain point that comes up, by communicating it, by having the very clear understanding that this is something that they want to solve, it will make everyone's life easier, better, and quicker. Sometimes we find ourselves going into a pool of data, extracting a lot of incredible insights, and we find out that they've been looking at the specific part of the insight as a problem, but just hasn't mentioned it. So I think communication is critical, and therefore the responsibilities on both sides, either way.
Yeah. Any other additional views on who should be owning that data?
I think it's an ecosystem, George. I think no one can sort of own it. You might get the industry to collaborate. So if you think about the data lifecycle from inception, planning, design, build, operate, it's probably, can the industry come up with like an RS 485, right? That becomes the, God, I'm old, that I don't think it exists anymore, becomes the sort of standard pipe, and you can evolve it. So again, I think like anything in life, it might not be possible for any one particular person to own the blueprint, but I think it's therefore down to client organizations, contractors, designers, etc., even equipment manufacturers, where they might be to tag into digital data to how they can, their machines or demolition robots could even operate, to actually create that data construct together, and that might become the standard. And I suspect, companies like Autodesk and Bentley and others must sort of be thinking about that. But I think it's an industry challenge, an industry opportunity, where no one particular individual organization can own it, but needs to contribute to it depending on where they are on the value chain.
Super. Tony, Marco, any additional views or feedbacks?
I totally agree that we need to share the ownership together. There not be just a single person, a single team owning the data or the strategy. So we, as a construction company or consultancy, you can have a team that try to lead, where we use data integration, but need to be shared and used by everyone to be able to get real value.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. It's got to be a complete open source, kind of data sharing solution. You can't have one person, holding all the cards and not, sharing, communicating that data. It just creates another silo in the chain that you just don't need or you don't want. So that data's got to be shareable. It's got to be actionable among everybody on that project, company, whatever it might be.
Perfect. Felix, any additional views?
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, the only point that I think is important is that you know, yes, so those elements are all like fair, but I think in general where we are right now, I mean, most of the data, and there's a lot of data, and we can talk a lot about that. I think people still even underestimate like how bad the situation is in that regard, right? Is like, yes, we have like siloed data, yes, we have all of these different problems. Like in reality, 80% of the data is garbage. It's like absolute garbage, right? So again, that brings me back to the point that, you know, we, even in these rankings of where the construction industry is like the lowest ranking, that is even a huge overestimate, right, where the industry is, right? Because most of the tech that is being used is shelfware. Most of the processes that are run on the tech are like run because some contractual reason, and there's some data that is being put into there, but it has nothing to do with what is actually happening on the site, right? So that brings me back to the whole point, like we have to really see this as there's a bigger need for more like strong change, right, in terms of how we think of like the business models of tech companies, how we think of how we can approach this differently, because the status quo is on the one hand depressing, on the other hand also really exciting, because it means that, you know, all of this is still blue open space, right? As in we can still, you know, really make a huge difference. We can make a huge impact, right, on the industry. But I think we have to zoom out a little bit and realize that like the status quo as it is today is in a really horrific state, right? And again, that actually the people that are in as part of those processes are willing to engage with us in changing that. But we as tech companies especially have to now like answer that with like more like with smarter solutions. And yeah,
I think that's Felix's way of saying you should join the construction tech domain.
Absolutely. And so just interestingly to the group again then, so if we can create a common space where data is shared, it requires quite a collaborative culture, but perhaps also requires, you know, a single kind of platform in which companies can all attach into, you know, to prevent more silos of similar data in different places and creating a strong usability for the end clients. You know, are there particular platforms or options or opportunities that people are seeing in the market that is doing well at this, of being able to integrate data from different systems?
I think Procore.
I didn't want to say it, Omri, so I'm glad you did.
It's like the biggest construction tech firms, the mother of all informational sockets. It's like, it's,
yeah. I mean, look,
from a silo to a farmhouse.
Yeah, I mean, look, I can be biased on it, obviously, working for Procore, but the whole idea on the, you know, the thought process behind Procore is that, and I think I've spoken this a number of times about people. Everybody seems to think there is a software out there that does everything. I think we mentioned someone said earlier on that, oh, there's got to be something out there that does everything. That silver bullet, I think you said, Adam. It doesn't exist. It's an enigma. There is zero software on the market that will cover every single base, you know, on a construction site. It just won't happen because of the complexities. But I think where Procore's kind of come to a realization that, you know, it can't happen. We're very open and honest to say, look, we know there's gaps in certain areas, which is why we've got our marketplace, which is the whole idea behind the marketplace, is to connect those solutions in. You know, yes, Procore is that, I don't like the term, but single source of truth. It's the area where everybody kind of operates from. It's the base solution, but there are all different solutions feeding in, you know, sharing and collaborating data within that area. And I think the key word there is open. You know, you can't have a solution like that and then put barriers up by saying, well, you're going to have to be charged for accessing this, or you're going to need to, you know, fill out a special request form to access these API or to build a technology solution for it. It's got to be completely open. And I think you've got to be in a situation where anybody can kind of freely come along, build technology, integrate with whatever platform they want. that's the only real way I think this is really going to take off, because it gives them the flexibility for construction companies to pick and choose the solutions according to the environment or the solution they're in.
Yeah, well, it's a good plug for you there as well, Tony. So.
Yeah, thanks, Omri. Appreciate that.
You got it.
Great. And coming back, sorry, so Omri, were you going to say something?
No, just going back to what Tony said. He said that you referred to the single source of truth. It's when you have the ability to have so many different sources of information, the cross-referencing and the crossing of different data sources will create a lower variant. So basically, as much information inputted into the system, the higher the integrity of the information is. So I think it's a win-win kind of a game for everyone.
Perfect. Coming back to the point around usability that I think a lot of people have mentioned, where do you see usability ranking in the selection of a technology or in the development of a technology? I guess that can be quite broad across the group, but if you're a startup, for example, and you're thinking, where do we focus our research and development? Do we focus this on creating the very best technology, or do we focus it on creating a scalable price or on usability? What are the areas that the panel think are where companies should be prioritizing?
Personally, sorry, Marco, just a very quick point. I mean, I think ease of use and usability is by far and away the number one thing that you've got to achieve. Again, we'll go back to that culture thing. I know Felix doesn't like that word culture, but if you do go back to that, if you've got a complex solution in anybody's hands, they're not going to get on with it. They're not going to deal with it. So you've got to make the solutions as easy as possible for anybody to pick up and operate on any kind of device, be it in a site, office, construction site, whatever it might be. So personally, I think usability and ease of use has got to be right up there with number one.
Yeah, I agree. This one links perfectly with the previous question about data. So as a general contractor, when we review digital solution, the point number one is usability, how easy it is to use. And the second one is data interoperability. If we can easily use the tool and the data can be shared between all the different platforms that we have, then this tool can really be embedded in our day-to-day technology, day-to-day use. One of the most successful tools we use have a 2-minute video training that our user need to view. Sometimes it doesn't need to be used because it's so simple that everyone can just grab an iPad or a camera, anything, and start to use it. So I believe that is a key element. We discarded great technology, but they were quite hard to be used. It's going to be very focused on specific user, probably the most digital minded.
Us as construction tech companies, we need to find the most strong-headed, persistent user and test it on him. If he uses it and he likes it, everyone can use it. And mentioned before, Adam, and I hope they don't see it, that the Netflix account and everything, and the Apple TV account, but using the product itself is the basics. And by the way, behind usability, we all say ease of use or usability. There's a lot of things behind it. There's connectivity to other informational sources. There's connectivity between different tech firms, not only communicating your information through a specific platform like Procore, but engaging with other companies as well. Conveying the information in a simple and easy manner to get it and get everything behind it. The implementation process, everything is that's the key of success for construction tech firms.
Yeah, I'd step back before we even go to usability and go back to that point about what problem we're trying to solve, and is someone already trying to solve it. And going back to, I'm a big fan of Eric Ries and Lean Startup. And desirability and usability being one, and then business viability. And often you get nailed on business viability because can the company pay for it? Does their business model enable you to make any money? If I take the world of consultancy, for example, we're a bit like lawyers, right? If you ever get divorced, and I've not got divorced yet, but if I ever did, the lawyer's job is to make my divorce as messy as possible so they get paid on time and materials, right? There's no incentive for me to get a quickie divorce, right? So for a consultancy organization, better trained people are non-billable, and then when they deliver the job, they're half billable. So the business model is back to front from a technology adoption standpoint. So you've got to, I think, from a ConstructTech standpoint, is by following sort of the Eric Ries principles and what problem you're trying to solve, you've got to look at the desirability and viability very carefully and actually understand that while it might appear to be a great idea and actually bring value, you'll never get anyone to pay for it because these other critical, what I call killer assumptions, are going to get in the way. And there's a great, again, I'll share this, a great thing in TechCrunch around success in ConstructTech. And it says here, it comes from proving the need for the tech, delivering immediate ROI, and ensuring workers know how to use it on the first try. So I think it's picked up on some of the points that the panelists have raised. So I'll take the link and I'll stick it in the chat as well. But it's had billions poured into ConstructTech. It is a difficult market segment, going back to some of the challenges you raised. And I think the first company that can crack the consistency challenge and that data challenge, I think will be very successful, but it is hard.
I do think there's also, I think it's easy to kind of take it a step further, and like usability on the one hand, you can just look at it from a UX perspective and say, well, this is, like a UX is easy to understand and for people to like simply do the things they want to do within that UX. But for me, that doesn't go far enough, like not even slightly. So I do think that the problem is as well, even if you build a UX that is really easy to use, but in that very easy way, you have to like 1,000 times input something on the construction site, and then if something changes, suddenly you have to 100 times input something new. But that is very simple, right? As in that is not actually easy to use. And that's how most of the software solutions today work, right? As in there's so much you can do with UX, right, in terms of like making it simpler. But fundamentally, like one of the key learnings for us is that site teams especially kind of require data and like clarity of what is going on when shit really hits the fan on the site, which is always happening, right? And there's always a firefighting, and that's the moment when the site teams have least time to spend time inputting a lot of data, right? And that's like one of the key reasons why we as a company have gone a step further and said, okay, we are actually in the business of inputting that data, and we are doing that in a hybrid fashion through both artificial intelligence, but also through humans and through architects and civil engineers. And that's something that, for example, investors really hate, right? As in, like, investors absolutely hate the fact that we as a company are hiring our own architects and civil engineers, right? But from our perspective, that's the only way we can help overcome this problem of like, how do you actually make something, to the example that everybody keeps using Netflix. Like, Netflix is great, but you're just consuming, right? As in, you're not required to input a ton of stuff before you can start consuming things. And if we get to that place, and if it's relevant information you're consuming that makes sense and that is actionable within the context of your job, then we are at the right place, right? But that's really we are far away from that, right, at the moment.
That is really interesting, and we've got a couple of questions as well in the Q&A. George, I'm going to come back to your questions in just a second, but Will's made a point around really education, and you can create a really usable tech, but how can you educate them to use it as well? And do you use scenario-based education to do that? How do you actually increase that adoptability, even if you've got a very usable product?
Show the value. It's the most straightforward answer ever. If you have a problem, and as I mentioned before in the beginning, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And if you show how your solution addresses a specific problem and raises the value, it's very clear. Once the value basically surpasses the investment required, then you will have usability. So if you can show that the product brings in the impact that it's supposed to be, dealing with the issue that it is supposed to, super quick you'll see the value of it and usability.
I always go back to the Simon Sinek the golden circle and the why. The why is by far and away the most important element, I think, of anything. You figure that out at the start, and everything else kind of falls into play.
Absolutely. So just going back to George's point quickly then. So when we were talking around the kind of single source of truth and the role that Procore plays as well as other companies, how come other open source data sharing platforms like Speckle haven't been able to take off?
I don't want to be the one answering every time, but what's the value for us as tech firms?
Yeah.
I get a lot of information from Procore, so I pour all my information there. If any other company that has the ability to provide me with those vast amount of information and they are super spreaded among different GCs and subcontractors and my clients, great. That's where I'm going to be. So I think the value for the construction tech firm now, not only for the GC.
And it's an interesting one. We've seen a number of kind of open source solutions. There's a lot of iPaaS solutions out in the industry where it kind of gives customers the ability to build out their own tech stack, like a low code, no code type solution. But again, I think it goes back to Will's point that he made it's about education. And if people don't understand the process, don't understand how it works, a lot of people look at these complete open source solutions and go, well, hang on a minute, it's a little bit too difficult. It's a little bit outside of my wheelhouse. I'm not sure if I can kind of undertake that. So that's my kind of thought on that point.
Yeah. Do you feel as well that maybe there's something around the sales channel that Procore provides? Because if you've got to optimize your tech for multiple open source platforms, that's pretty cost intensive. Whereas if there's one that's got pretty significant market share, that's also a strong sales channel, as a construction tech firm, you're probably likely to focus.
Absolutely, and marketing can never be underestimated in this format, right? Having the name out there and people understanding and knowing what you're about, that's the biggest thing of all.
Yeah. Question from Nick Decker at Ignites. Usability is key, but what about tech sprawl? So having a point solution for each problem means you have an app for every individual workflow. How do you find the balance? Where is the balance?
Connectivity.
Yeah, connectivity is one thing, but we get asked this quite a lot from a marketplace perspective, and people, very uneasy about having to, go to a different app to do a different solution. A lot of the times my answer to this is, I'd probably challenge a lot of people that ask this question. Open up your iPhone. How many apps have you got? You're comfortable navigating through 15, 20, 30 apps on your iPhone to do different tasks. It's no different. And the other element of it is, are you going to be in all of those individual workflows at once? The likelihood is probably not. But again, it just boils back to, we can't do this in construction, or no, it's not something we can do. Why not? We do it in an everyday life. Why can't you do it within a construction site within the industry?
Yeah,
I believe we should have a balance, because we cannot have one app or one tool that does everything. But the other side is too complicated to have millions of app or tools for each different task. So try to find the balance of what they connect to each other, the best solution in terms of usability, and try to connect them, avoiding to have, so try to stand the middle between one single app and a million, so to say, a bit in the middle to connect them together.
Yeah. Fair enough. Any further points on that? No, sounds like we're pretty good. And we've got an additional question from Ben Weldon Bays, who says, is the show the value answer really that simple? Collecting daily allocation data from a site-based Ganger develops them, zero value. The value is for their employer. Not every problem that needs solving can have tech spin where every user gets value from it. Some things just need doing.
Can I answer first, as I said, show the value? No, if it was that simple, we wouldn't have a job. The reason that we're doing what we're doing and the reason that we have investors that show faith in us is because we cracked a specific issue and a specific problem that needs to be solving. The show the value is our responsibility to show the value. If we make the solution as simple as possible and show the value quickly and efficiently, and that relates to what Adam said before about showing the quick ROI from the day of implementation, we've done our job, and we're a sustainable company that has the right to exist. If we don't show the value, if we don't show the return on investment, we don't have the right to exist, and our investors will back on. So it's not simple. It's very complicated, but it is our job to do it. So yeah,
I think there's also actually a really interesting dynamic in construction that doesn't exist in other industries, which is that to the whole point that, well, in a lot of other sectors or solution spaces, you can just say, well, top down, just enforce something and it will work, right? Like why doesn't it work in construction? And I think the really interesting element you have in construction that is pretty unique is that you do have this kind of core construction team, the construction managers, project directors, executives, and they run the show on 99% of sites, and like they hold the balance of power on in most ways, right? So it's not as easy. Like if you can't get that team to get value from the solution, it's extremely hard to enforce something in construction. And we've seen that over and over again. And we've also thought it initially like, well, great, we have these business unit sponsors that they want to go forward, etc. That's really not how it works in construction at all, right? And project directors on average have significantly more influence over what gets done and what doesn't get done than the CEOs of construction companies. And the CEOs they know that, and they appreciate that. And the project directors care about what their project managers tell them, and whether or not the project managers care about the solution you present them. So it really isn't it isn't a sector where it's then also say, well, in theory, right, if all of these things just work and if you can just enforce them, then it will fall into place. That just isn't how the sector is kind of structured. Yeah, that's why it is actually really, really important for those individuals that to have themselves like get real benefit from what you're providing them, which isn't the case in a lot of other sectors.
Yeah. And an interesting point just come across my head. And we spoke very early on about least digitized industry, around, and I think construction tech is still in its infancy. I think everybody can kind of agree on that in terms of, adoption, invention, innovation. It's all still on an ascendancy. And I think we're still in a point now where there are lots and lots of construction technologies company coming to the market, trying to solve a specific problem or trying to solve a perceived problem within the industry. So I also think that there will become a point in the future where it kind of consolidates, it settles down, and you've got specific tech for specific problems, solving showing the value to a specific problem, whatever it might be. But I think we're just at that point where people are probably quite overwhelmed with the amount of tech out there. And it's like, well, you can fill out a form. Oh, we've got an app for that. Oh, you can sign into site. Oh, we've got an app for that. Oh, by the way, we've got an app for that. And it's starting to snowball a bit in that way. But I think it will consolidate in the future so that you'll get the point where totally agree things need doing. Absolutely right. But sometimes there are better ways to do things.
There's another question from Alan, which really nicely brings us on to the kind of final two topics around business case and scalability. And so he's asked, there's lots of many digital products on the market, but they seem to be adopted one site at a time. How do we influence a top-down approach? I wonder, Adam and Marco, maybe separately, you could just give some insights as to how your organizations buy tech and what that route looks like, particularly around whether it is a top-down approach or actually more of a kind of bottom-up approach that you would take.
Maybe as both a consumer of tech and as a creator of tech, I would say it's two ways, right? Top down and bottom up. Bottom up from actually is there a real problem to be solved? there is, and then top down what the economic impact if we change. I think the shift that we're going through is recognizing that we've got a shift from selling capabilities to selling services, and projects consuming services and capabilities, not individual sets of hours from different disciplines. So going to more of a service type, capability type approach, where we can have a consistent use of technology, people and process, so that we can almost, if you like, get to a point around Lego building blocks for our projects. So it starts to drive from that consistency. Where we have started to consolidate and standardize the service offering, it's meant where that we are using like an Esri platform, or we've created our own particular product for certain areas that we can actually drive some scale. So I think the journey that we're on as Jacobs is to recognize that automation fundamentally changes our operating model. And a lot of what we're doing now is around how do we shift selling outputs to outcomes and getting paid for the value we create, not the hours that we sell. How do we change the way we measure reward? Because obviously metrics drive behaviors, our people. So we don't just look at billability. We look at billability as a basket of metrics. We look at productivity. And how do we do that in a consistent way across the organization? So for us, for me, technology adoption and scale has become less about tech and data. It's more about internal, external business model, shifting how we sell, and how we're fundamentally organized, and our target operating model as an industry. And that should make it easier for construct tech companies that can add real value to real pain points to be consumed at scale within our organization. So that's the journey that we're on.
Perfect.
In terms of general contraction, so I agree, it's not just a top-down approach, but also need to be a bottom-up. So asking our site team, our project, which problem we have, which technology we can use, try to pilot them within standard environment, so as a standard way, so we can just define KPI, try to understand the benefit, but we try to apply after as a company-wide, as an enterprise agreement. Unless there is a specific case, having so many different technologies in different type of site, it makes life much harder in terms of compliance, training, usability. So we try to define the solution, understand if it works, and if it works, then apply as a wider scale.
Yeah, and Marcus, something to build upon for that. I know when we spoke the other day, you were saying that for a lot of the use cases, it's really about going to the site teams, understanding the problems, piloting it, making sure you can develop the business case, which internally you can champion into different levels of the business to kind of activate enterprise agreements if that's the right thing. But am I right to think it almost always goes sort of that way, rather than a CEO mandating there is a particular tech that they haven't seen in the business, but they've seen someone else use, and yes, it's not necessarily that approach, is it?
I believe that way rarely works, because we have to use technology to fix a problem that we have on site, never other way around. So if we are seated just in the head office, we really don't know the real problem that's happening on site. So we try to ask our site team, what's currently top 3-4 problem that we currently have in that particular year, and we try to find technology that can fix the problem. Going the other way around, sometimes it's just a showcase of technology in terms of advertisement that really doesn't fix the problem we have on site. And that's productivity and efficiency.
And if you're happy to share any transparency around it, from when you found something that you've really been able to prove works and has scalability across the organization, are there particular appraisal metrics that you need to be presenting back to the board in order to do that, whether it's financial, whether it's productivity? What are the common things that the board are looking for?
Depends on the type of solution of the issue that we are trying to find. So it can be or increased efficiency, increased productivity, time saving, cost saving. So it depends which are the issue that we are trying to fix. We identify the right KPI, the right target. So we try to measure, most likely can be time saving for our site user, or cost saving because we do something in a short amount of time, so we can save time and money. So whenever we define those KPI, we try to define a case study, bring back to the board, say if we want to use this technology as a wider scale, gonna cost us X, but how much we're gonna save in time and saving in efficiency and health and safety. So all of these elements.
Can I'll add to that because sometimes you've got technology that's what I call accretive to the bottom line. It might enable you to, let's say, by changing the way you deliver your service, you might drive more value for the customer at the same price point, which means you can drive market share, which means you drive revenue and accretive margins. So we can measure, for example, GM per hour, gross margin per hour, which is based on productivity. The challenge you sometimes got is what I call electric windows. So you don't pay a premium today for electric windows on cars. All cars come with electric windows. And sometimes it becomes more challenging for business cases where you've got to spend money to make your electric windows. Otherwise, no one's going to buy your car. So sometimes the challenge can be for tech companies that helps a particular, say, for example, in the consultancy space, stay alive. That can be a slightly more challenging business case because it's not accretive margin. It's staying with the margin you've got, and that can be a difficult sell because I sometimes think that the leadership can often they can say the words of being tech enabled and just think it happens. Often in some levels of organizations at the C-suite, there's a lack of understanding the complexity of shifting from a people to a people and technology based business. So if you're trying to sell into those organizations, the digital maturity and understanding at senior levels of those organizations is somewhat limited, which actually also makes it quite challenging. I see Tony his facial expression, they may have seen that as well as some organizations you dealt with. So what might appear as common sense and easy actually becomes quite challenging because the maturity of the organization which you're trying to sell into.
I mean, Adam, your point earlier is also really interesting. I completely agree with you that especially like the whole billable hour business model is something that is extremely that makes it extremely hard for consultancy businesses to embrace tech. And yeah. we see that I mean we've at the beginning been pitching to consultancy style businesses quite a bit. But we realized after some time, even the ones that pronounce themselves to be extremely tech, positive towards tech, we always see kind of the same curve where we are pitching and there's first the realization like, oh, this is amazing. This will help me so much. And it's like, wait a second, this is helping me too much. This is going to like cannibalize my billable hours by way too much. Yeah.
You've in that space, you've hit the nail on the head. So, and it's not just the business metrics, but it's also the way people are measured internally, because tech means they're less billable, which itself drives entire behavior. Now, as companies in our space, if we think about why Blockbuster didn't buy Netflix, Blockbuster, anyone here used to old enough to get a video? Come on, Tony. Yeah. Okay. Do you know how Blockbuster made money?
Probably movies that were late or something.
Yeah. Correct. Late fees. So what happens if you go to an online streaming service? No late fees, right? And like Kodak built the first camera, but then thought about the film business being destroyed. So really the shift for some of our sector is to embrace business model disruption and to think about the business of the future, not the business they've left behind. And if you start to use tech and data and you can start to shift to foresight, then really, Felix, what you've got to help and articulate to those companies that are interested but can't get their hand around the business model, part of your job is to show them what that new business model could be if you want to sell your technology into them. And it's a real challenging part that actually as a tech organization, you've also got to come along with business model transformation.
Yeah, I must say that we tried different business models, and I'm a fifth generation to construction and builders family, and I constantly heard the same conversations at home, and we constantly tried to invent a whole new business model. And today we charge per square foot per month, and the language of per square foot is something that construction companies feel comfortable with. It becomes a part of their like magic calculation for everything they do otherwise. So you calculate for man hours per square foot, you calculate for materials, for crane time, everything. So all of a sudden you become, it legitimizes like the adding. So I think that's a bit different because we didn't break it, but we took tech into the everyday business model.
Yeah. There's a great guy, I've got to know. I've never actually met him. Guy Greg Prickerall. He's an ex-product manager in worked for many organizations, and he put something on LinkedIn today, and he said our product managers change agents within companies. And actually, the recognition I've had even in Jacobs is product managers are there to build great products. But we've actually been asking our product managers also to engage with transformation. That isn't their job. It is a different role, but you've got to do both together. And we probably as an organization underestimated business model and organizational transformational change that is required to enable the tech and data to become prevalent in everything we do. And maybe as an industry, that's what I call adaptive leadership, adaptive change. It's something that's just not been part of the industry DNA. And really, when we go back to all of this, and I go back to, again, unfortunately, Felix, culture, that maybe we're quite used to process and tech. Actually, this is an adaptive leadership challenge to fundamentally change how we make money. And that's the problem we're trying to solve, not tech.
Yeah. The adaptive leadership piece is fascinating to me. It's definitely something we did with the Institute of Civil Engineers about 5 years ago, and kind of really working with a lot of the consultancies. It was just before the ACE report came out about the changing business model perspective, but a lot of it focused on adaptive leadership and how, yes, corporations perhaps need to embrace more of an adaptive style as we broach the next generation. As we're just concluding now on time, it'd be really great perhaps if everyone wants to just offer some final summary thoughts and maybe any quick tips on implementing construction tech for the audience. Felix, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I think from my perspective, as I was highlighting, I do think we are still like very, very much at the beginning, and the way that we like to think about it is that there's a lot of complexity, there's a lot of noise, but ultimately, given that the status quo is one in which most of the stuff isn't really being used in the way that is intended, to start really from square one and think of it from the perspective of how can you get the basics right, but how can you get the basics right where it really, really matters, like first. And that's, from our perspective, that's ultimately, core construction execution. And as long as, from a how I would approach that also if I were like running a general contractor or a company like this perspective, like as long as this isn't solved, right, like it's not really useful to try to tackle the other challenges in any meaningful way, right? Because everything else like flows from it. So that's kind of how we think about this and how we approach the problem.
Brilliant. Tony, would you like to share your final thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with what Felix has said, but you think about that problem, don't just dive in, because somebody's told you've got to adopt tech in your business. Don't just dive in and accept whatever's needed. Understand the problems, understand the pain points, and above all, embrace it. I think that's the key thing, going with an open mind with it, because if you go in there with doubts at the start or trepidations over what's going to come, it's going to kind of fall on its face. So go in with an open mind and embrace the technology. Perfect.
Omri, would you like to share your thoughts?
Oh, I completely agree with trying new things, but try it lightly. So tread lightly, develop things, see the impact, and close the loop after getting client feedback. Constantly talk to your clients, constantly try to understand if their pain points are the same, if the solution that you're aiming to, and share with them your concept. Even in terms of wireframes, do you think that this will solve the issue that you're facing? If so, develop it. If not, be very, very lean and mean in terms of because in our world we can develop everything, and sometimes you'll develop things that are not usable, not interesting, and don't make an impact. So lean and mean, I think, is the right approach.
Perfect. Marco?
I believe that when we want to employ or start using new technology, start to focus not on the tech first, but which is the issue that we want to fix, to be able to find the right technology and need to be usability and data interoperability, the two key elements that have to be counted for using a new technology.
Nice. And then, was it Adam?
Yeah, go buy the book, The Lean Startup by Eric Ries.
Or did I come to you first?
So they've broken up there.
Say that again, Adam.
All right, so broke up. Go and buy the book, Eric Ries, The Lean Startup. I don't get a commission, but that's a brilliant book, and you'll hear some things that were raised today by some of the panelists. Book of common sense, but not common practice. And either if you're a client or a supplier, and embrace the fact that it's culture and business model transformation. It's not actually a tech and data problem.
Fair enough. Tony, have I already come to you?
You have.
Great. I thought so. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you to the panelists for such a great debate. There'll be a recording of this available over the next couple of days. And if you have any questions at all for the panelists, feel free to drop an email and we'll make sure they get them. Thank you, everyone.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Been a pleasure.